Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. If you're catching this live, if you're not, hopefully you catch it later, and hopefully you enjoy it. I have been away for a while. I got sick again, but probably the same thing. Uh, I'm pretty sure it was influenza, a good old-fashioned influenza. Had a case in years, and it wrung me out. Even with antibiotics, just kicked my ass. Um, a little bit out of it. That's how I rang in the new year. Was sick again. The exact same symptoms as 2 weeks from before. All the head cold stuff, all the chest cold stuff, all kind of hit me again, and kind of laid me out. So this week has just been I've been able to work, and after that I usually just sleep, and it's been soup and tea and water. Real exciting stuff. Anyway, enough about that. I'm back to do a video because while I've been away, Tom has been churning out quite a bit of good content, and I wanted to kind of catch these in order before I kind of lose track of them. Mostly right now, I'm going to apologize. I'm really fixated on that newest One Way video that he just put out with One Way's wife screaming in the background. If you haven't seen it, you don't know it in context. I will probably end up featuring it in a review later, but yeah, I'm going to try not to fixate on that and try to concentrate on the videos at hand. So these two in particular, I was interested in because I've known. I don't think I've ever talked with Brenda, who's in the description. Um, Brenda has been around for a while. I don't know that I've ever had a conversation with her. She's had run-ins with Darth Dawkins in the past. And I'm pretty sure she's had run-ins with JRobin in the past, but this one was particularly bad because JRobin is not particularly bad. That's sort of been his evolution. And so they have a little not really confrontation. It's just sort of a back and forth. Brenda is doing her best to be civil, um, and JRobin is doing the opposite of that. So yeah, it's fairly fairly terrible. But there were some interesting points in here. It's been a while since I watched it. There were some interesting points in here that I remember thinking about, and I wanted to point out, especially given the second video, where which is another clubhouse interaction between Brenda and a group of Christians. I think it's Nate's channel. Nate. I don't know if he goes by another name. Anyway, that being said, let me give a shout out to a few people that are here that have been here for a little while. JC Knott, you were first. Welcome. Michael Fredgren, good to see you. Alpha K91, good to see you. Joker says, I don't know that I've seen you before. Good to see you. Michael Deaton, God equals the square root of -1. Pothead, yeah. Let's see. Who else is in here? Secular Pagan Mom, good to see you. Okay. You guys were having a long conversation while I was getting set up. Enrique, nice to see you again. And Gord Lord, I've never been one for live streams, but Jefferson's got the perfect voice and sense of humor to make excited to catch this one. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know that about the perfect voice, especially now. It's probably going to give out, so I'll try to get my points across. And I don't know how long this video is going to go on before I, start choking and coughing. But I appreciate your username, Gord Lord. And I'm not being sarcastic. That's a good username. Maya, great to see you, as always. Yes, that sucks. Don't get the flu, folks. If you can, wear 3 masks. Not for COVID. Wear it for the good old run-of-the-mill flu. The one running around the U.S. right now sucks. Maynard Saves, always good to see you. And I think that's everybody for right now in the chat. Let's see. Paul D. Hello, hello. Parker, good to see you. Daniel Nero, hello. Lori Hayes, how you doing? Hempraiser, good evening. And I think that's everybody. Last but not least, certainly not least, Spooky Bedhair, who is an omniscient presence on the internet. And Pinworm, good to see you all. If I miss any of you guys later, as usual, I try to highlight all your comments. So trying to do better about verbally acknowledging everybody that's shown up, especially when you've been waiting for a while. All right, let's get this one started. We're starting with the first one, JRobin and Brenda having a conversation with each other. We'll move on to the second one, which I think kind of caps things off fairly well, at least for what I recall I was going to do in terms of criticizing the two of these. We'll see if I can keep it together.
All right. Who's the next atheist who wants to come forward?
I'd like to.
Okay, go ahead. You're an atheist, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Brendan. So explain to us how it is the case that there's no God.
So have you formalized your inference yet?
How's it the case that there's no God, Brendan?
No, I was just wondering, when you talked to AY the other day, have you
Brendan,
formalized the
Brendan,
inference?
Brendan, how's it the case that there's no God?
Oh,
Don't
there's
ask
no
me
good
questions.
reason. Yeah.
You're right. Let's see here. Sorry. Again, rusty from from the beginning. Can you guys hear anything? Are you hearing it but not seeing it? If that's the case, I'll wind it back. I know what I did wrong. It's very simple. Can hear perfectly. Okay. Switch that around and there we go. By the way, welcome, Carlton. Thanks for coming.
Doesn't follow.
I would just like to know if you've done that. That's just by way
Brendan.
of talking casually. I'm just talking
Brendan,
casually.
Brendan, did you come in here to defend your?
So this has been pointed out already by JRobin's title, but or Tom's title for this. JRobin is going out of his way to refer to Brenda as Brendan, because misgendering is cool, I guess, if you're a Christian. Yeah, get used to that.
Your atheism?
Sure, yeah.
Good. So how's it the case that there's no God?
Well, there's no good reasons to believe in God.
That doesn't follow. The fact that you're appealing to your incredulity, that's a non sequitur.
No, it's all.
So I did kind of want to touch on this point because these guys have been harping on this. It hasn't just been JRobin, but some of these other people I've heard in some of the clubhouse groups. The Christians have really been kind of jumping on this thing where, like, okay, well, if all I get from a Christian is this kind of answer, well, there are no good reasons to believe in God. There's a lot of reasons why a non-believer might say that, and rather than attempting to unpack that with the skeptic that they're talking to, they just are now attempting to try to accuse them of engaging in some kind of either informal or formal fallacy, even though it's not really, they're not laying out a syllogism or some kind of, they're saying, look, I've looked at different, depending on the person, they've looked at different arguments, they've been presented with different religions or different gods, they've heard different subjective experiences for different religious backgrounds. They haven't heard a good reason, come across a good reason to believe in it, which is really kind of a casual way of saying they haven't seen anything or been exposed to anything that's convinced them, towards the positive side of the whole proposition. Does a God exist? Not that complicated. So the fact that Christians now have to actually kind of rely on this weird thing where, like, well, that's not good enough. What you're doing is actually engaging in a fallacy. Like, no, that's Christians doing that kind of stuff is they're abusing philosophical language now so that they can abuse skeptics, so that they don't have to do the hard work of actually talking to another person that disagrees with them, figuring out why. This is just this is how this is how you learn how to manipulate people or manage people rather than learning how to actually communicate with them, trying to understand them. And if you were interested, if the religion is supposed to be about honest conversion, you should be able to have an honest conversation with people, and hopefully accept their answers for what they're worth, and maybe even help them, if you can, explore them a little deeper. This whole thing of just saying, no, that's a fallacy. Don't you understand? It's a and offer them some, hand waving, bullshit. Like it's a genetic fallacy. It's an appeal to incredulity. It's an appeal to ignorance. Like, no, not necessarily. You don't know what this person has seen. You asked a casual question. Why don't you think there's a God? And their answer is, well, I don't see any reason to believe in one. You haven't gone into any details as to what they've been exposed to. So, or what their justifications are for that. They're saying they don't have any reasons for it. Okay, what are their reasons for not believing in God? What makes them think that it's not the case? I don't see a lot of Christians asking that second part. So, and for any atheists out there, if you're trying to use that answer and hoping that it's not going to have a backup to it, maybe don't give that answer unless you're prepared to say, look, like you don't have any reason to really believe in God. That is a fair answer, especially if the reasons that you have for doubting God are things like some of the philosophical arguments against God, or the problem of evil, or difficulties with things like the Bible or other religious texts, comparative religious inferences, those kinds of things.
All the arguments for God fail.
That's a genetic fallacy.
No, it isn't.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. Do you know what the genetic fallacy is?
Not.
What's
It
the
says
genetic fallacy?
It says that the source of a thing doesn't refute the argument.
Right. So the source of the arguments that we're talking about, the fact that you have theists coming here with what you may deem to be bad arguments, it doesn't follow that God doesn't exist.
I don't think they're bad arguments because they're theists.
You just told me that they all failed, did you not?
Notice what he did there, that little trick. You said they all fail, but he blamed her, right? He accused her of saying they fail because they come from Christians. And if she would have had to have said that. I don't accept arguments from theists. That would be a genetic fallacy, right? Or at least kind of the beginning of one. That's not what she did.
I think they're bad. I think they're bad arguments, not because.
Good. So the fact that people have bad arguments for things, the fact that people have bad arguments doesn't mean that what they're arguing for is false.
And that's not what she's saying either. So
you're gonna have to give another non-fallacious. You're gonna have to give a non-fallacious. So that was a second fallacious answer you gave to me.
So the corollary should be kind of addressed, or maybe the opposite of that. Like, okay, well, just because somebody is giving a bad argument for the thing they claim to believe in doesn't necessarily mean it's false. Okay, well, should I believe it? Should I assume it to be true just in case they're right? Like, is that the level of credulity that we're going to enter into? And with how many things are we going to enter into? Like what particular kinds of propositions should we confront with that level of credulity? Because it seems to me that the only time Christians are willing to do that is with their God. Actually, most religious people are willing to do that is with their particular God. I've heard Muslim apologists do this. So
there's no good arguments.
Brendan,
we're here for.
That was the second fallacious argument you gave to me.
But you're just not working.
Brendan, listen. That was the second fallacious argument you gave to me.
This makes the JRobin technique of repeating someone's name that very condescending. Like I'm by saying your name, it's really interesting because in a lot of circles it's used to like remind someone of their humanity or to try to get them to ground themselves or get them to calm down. But when he does it, it actually just infuriates you because when he's repeating your name, he's actually it's more like he's spitting it out, like he's trying to rid it from his body and mind.
Okay. Do you have a non-fallacious line of reasoning that you can give that's going to falsify God?
He hasn't established that her reasoning was fallacious. In fact, he misrepresented most of what she attempted to say.
It's a good reason. A good reason. I have a reason.
Brendan.
Let me.
Dude, Brendan, listen. I asked the yes or no question.
I know that you're trying to.
Brendan, listen.
Me and to
Brendan, listen. Your position is that God does not exist. Do you have a non-fallacious line of reasoning that's going to falsify God?
Yes,
good. Okay, good. How does it follow necessarily that there's no God?
It's not a necessary. It's that there are.
Do you have a non-fallacious line of reasoning from which it follows that there's no God?
There are no good.
I like how it has to be like a two-part question. You have to have a non-fallacious reasoning for justifying why there is no God. Okay. That can be done a couple of different ways. There are inductive arguments. There are property disproofs. There are. This isn't that tough, and you could come up with a valid argument to disprove God, and it wouldn't. Is JRobin going to accept that? Is validity good, or does it have to be sound? And does JRobin know the difference between validity and soundness when it comes to deductive arguments?
Good arguments for God, therefore it's reasonable to conclude.
We already did this, Brendan. Brendan, we already did this. Your position that you just gave to me is the appeal to genetic. You're doing the genetic fallacy.
It's not a genetic fallacy.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Okay, fact that people. So wait, let me get this straight. If somebody has a bad argument for something, then that means that automatically means that the argument that they're giving or the thing that they're arguing for is false.
No, and that's not the genetic argument. That's not the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy would be like if I tried to say that your argument is bad because you are bad. So I don't know what he's trying to do. Like, what you're trying to do is say that because this person, now he's no longer blaming the person because they've given a bad argument, the thing they're arguing for is false. No, that would be more like an appeal to ignorance kind of fallacy. But even then it's not correct. If somebody's attempting to give a bad justification for something, then you don't have as much of it. You don't really have a reason to believe it. Outside, unless they can do something else, unless they can demonstrate it or provide another explanation, or maybe appeal to a subjective experience or something like that. Any of this stuff kind of sound familiar? This is all getting very desperate, and I think it's interesting because I think JRobin might actually kind of be on the cutting edge of any of this kind of internet Christian fundy apologetic stuff, because but if this is it, like, this has really gotten bad. This is I'm surprised this really lasted this long. But yeah, this precept stuff is just the worst.
No, it could be true.
Okay, good. Then you're admitting it's a non sequitur. It's a non sequitur. It's a genetic fallacy. Because you just Brendan, you don't know what you're talking about. You just told me it's not necessarily the case that if somebody gives a bad argument for something, that is false. So that is it. So then what you just told me does not necessitate that God does not exist. It is a non sequitur fallacy.
No, I'm not making a deductive inference.
Okay. Do you have
Yeah, and keep that in mind, right? Brenda's saying, I'm not making a deductive inference. And consider how this all started. Brenda came in there and was like, hey, you had a conversation with AY. Did you ever formalize your inference? Right? Did you get it? Did you work that out? Like AY was trying to do with you? And of course he immediately puts Brenda in, on the treadmill, or in the hedge maze, whatever they call it. I don't want to call it a script because they get dismissive when you call it a script.
Have anything, Brendan? Do you have anything? Brendan, I'm asked. You need to listen. You need to answer the question that I'm asking you. What you give needs to follow necessarily from what you give that there is no God. You need to necessitate that claim that there is no God. Are you able to do that right now, Brendan?
I'm making an inductive inference based
Brendan,
on the
are
fact
you able to
Brendan,
you're not answering the question. Are you able to give me a line of reasoning that's going to necessitate the falsity of God? Are you able to do that today?
I gave reasons.
I gave you that was a yes or no.
See, this is interesting. And Brenda is insisting, like, I gave reasons, right? And probably can give more. Brenda's been doing this for a while. This thing that and I love how JRobin's doing this. This whole performative trailer trash Torquemada routine that a lot of these guys do is just it's so cringeworthy at this point, because, like, she came in there and wanted to know if you had formalized what you were talking about with AY. I think at the end of my conversation with him, and JRobin, me and JRobin and Tom Rabbit, when everyone came in towards the end. So he immediately gets triggered, and now he's insisting that Brenda formalize an argument for the non-existence of God. I mean, aren't these the guys that these guys frequently start Clubhouse things like, why won't atheists answer our questions? I wonder why not.
No question. So I'd expect a yes or no answer, Brendan.
I've already
Are you able, Brendan, listen, the next thing that comes out of your mouth better be yes or no, or we're going to move on. Okay. Are you able to provide for me? The next thing that comes out of your mouth needs to be yes or no. After I ask this question here, listen very carefully.
So, when someone tells you how to respond, that's usually a good sign that you should probably stop talking to them. I'm not trying to tell Brenda what to do. Oh, and I should have prefaced my introduction to this. This is lest anyone on the Christian side think that I'm trying to white knight for Brenda. I do not need to white knight for Brenda. Brenda does not need my defense. Brenda is more than capable of taking on any of these guys, and is quite a bit more willing to do that than I am. She probably has quite a bit more patience with them than me. Other than that, but yeah, no. My only goal in doing this is that I thought she had an interesting exchange with him, and it's worth illustrating just how shitty he's being.
I'm going to give you a true dichotomy. Are you able to provide a line of reasoning that's going to necessitate that therefore God is false, that therefore God does not exist?
There is
yes
no deductive
Brendan,
argument.
is that a yes or no to my question?
I'm answering you. There's no deductive argument to prove that gods do not exist.
Good. So then you're being arbitrary. Then you're being arbitrary.
No, it's just an inductive inference. It's based on the fact.
No, you're being arbitrary because God either necessarily exists. Let me explain to you. God either necessarily exists or necessarily does not exist. Okay.
What's your argument?
That's actually not exactly how that works. And I'm not well versed enough in philosophy to really pick this apart, but I had problems with that when he said that. It's either the case that God necessarily exists or necessarily does not exist. So, I mean, maybe that's accurate, but it sounds like what JRobin's talking about here is what I often accuse the preceptors of doing, which is they dabble in a handful of their favorite, kind of the greatest hits arguments for God. And the big one, I think, for Darth and for JRobin is the modal ontological argument. And the argument goes that the modal ontological argument is kind of it's a variation. I think it's Alvin Planting is a variation, kind of a way of salvaging the original ontological argument from Ensom. And the idea behind it is you basically have this kind of setup where God is either necessary or he's impossible. Those are the two things. And so it's an interesting argument to kind of work through, but it does have its issues. And I think that's what JRobin is doing here, but I thought that was an interesting way of saying it. It's God necessarily exists or God necessarily doesn't exist. I guess that's the same thing as saying he's impossible or he's necessary. Generally, though, what they mean by necessary in that particular argument is he exists in all possible worlds, right? He's logically necessary, exists in all possible worlds. But again, better philosophers than I. I'm just a dilettante, just an enthusiast. Better people than me have tackled that argument and can break that down a lot better. But the interesting thing is there are ways of taking the modal ontological argument to demonstrate that the God being talked about is impossible. That aspect of the argument is avoided at all costs by theists.
When it comes to a metaphysical,
and I shouldn't say all theists, because some theists might be philosophers, they would be willing to play with both sides of the argument just to kind of suss it out. But most of these guys, precept apologists online, they're not going to want to wrestle with that side.
Framework is either necessarily going to be the case or necessarily not the case. Okay, so unless you have falsified God, then you're reasoning completely arbitrarily. Okay,
no, that's not
because
how
you believe that
work.
This is necessary. You believe it's false.
I think it's false based on my inference that nobody has presented a good argument for it to exist.
Listen. Do you understand and accept that God either necessarily does or does not exist?
No. What's your argument for that?
Because we're talking about metaphysical frameworks, meaning that there's not going to be any contingency or any parameter that God or that any metaphysical framework is contingent upon. So there's not going to be something like some sort of a non-zero on both sides, so the affirmative and the negative of this metaphysical framework's actuality.
Okay. Is God a necessary being? Is God a necessary being?
Do you accept what I just said?
You're saying that God is a necessary being, right?
I said that all metaphysical frameworks are either going to be necessarily actual or necessarily false.
Sorry, I was muted for that last bit. See what I mean? Gone for 11 days and I can't even run StreamYard. No, what I was saying with that last one, anytime he brings up this idea of metaphysical foundation or metaphysical necessity, I just don't buy it. I don't think that he's being dishonest all the time, but when he gets into this angle of his shtick, I really feel like he's extra insecure here. That was really the only point I was going to make.
Do you accept that?
No.
I just gave it to you.
What's your argument?
I'll give it to you again, Brendan. And if you don't respond to it, then we're going to move on. Okay. I'm going to explain to you why. I'm going to explain it to you again. I'm going to explain it to you, Brendan. Listen, when we're dealing with a metaphysical framework, we're not dealing with the normal other facts that we're talking about. Okay. We're talking about that which is foundation.
Well, when you're dealing with metaphysics, you're not really dealing with what I think most most philosophers would consider facts. That's sort of the problem. So I don't know if he's a little bit right or even more wrong than he thought.
And fundamental to all of reality, meaning that there's not going to be some sort of...
Yeah, and JC caught that. Like, yeah, he corrects himself from Brenda to Brendan, so he's deliberately doing it. Yeah, he actually had to stop himself to make sure that he broke character a little bit and was just willing to accept Brenda for her name and her identity. Like, oh no, broke character there. I forgot. This is also supposed to be an exercise in breaking you down and demonstrating how much I hate what you are. Sorry if that sounded a little overwrought, but that is what he's doing, even if he's not really aware of it. But it's these Christians, it's just they're in a corner and it's them against the world, and they gotta punch their way out of that. It's like that's not really what you got to do. Jesus already won the fight for you if your worldview is correct. So, what are you guys stressing about?
Sort of a parameter that this thing is beholden to, that's going to constitute, or that's going to be the reason it's depending on for why it exists, meaning that it has a 50-50 chance of existing, 50% chance it does exist, 50% chance it doesn't exist. No, it's going to be the very source and basis for all contingency, meaning it's going to be necessarily the case fundamentally that it exists, or necessarily not the case, because there's going to be something else that's going to displace it. Okay?
No.
So do you accept and agree to what I just said? If not, you're going to have to give a rebuttal.
Wouldn't you have to appeal to metaphysical facts?
Do you accept what I just said or no?
Well, I'm trying to understand it because I don't understand it. Wouldn't you have to appeal to metaphysical facts?
For what?
For your metaphysical framework.
You'd have to appeal to a metaphysical ultimate, or a foundation, a grounding. Because that's what it means to be you're talking about metaphysical in the sense that what the nature of facts are fundamentally. So there's going to be an ultimate frame of reference or basis that you're going to be pointing to that's going to...
But see, this is the problem with the precept thing, and even other Christians complain. This is the Smoky Saint guy that hollers at these guys every once in a while when they start screaming at each other. Does the exact same thing. Your starting point is your own subjective experience. Trying to ground something beyond your subjective experience and say, oh, we have some ultimate thing, and that's how we can know anything for certain, does not get you past, that does not get you out of your subjective experience. Right? They're just saying, oh, well, it transcends us. And yeah, but it doesn't transcend your subjective experience. It might transcend you ontologically in the fact that there are things that exist beyond the things that you know. Great. That's not something that's really hard for a lot of people to comprehend. But when some ding dong says something like this in terms of epistemology or whatever, that's where this thing really breaks down, at least for me.
The ground, all the other facts you're talking about.
I'm not sure that we could ever know what the ultimate nature of reality is.
That's irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Not really, because if let's say that JRobin's being honest there. If that's irrelevant to what they're talking about, what's the point of appealing to an ultimate foundation to all of reality? If they're willing to acknowledge that their epistemology is incomplete and that subjective experience is where everyone starts when it comes to things, anything else that you do after that is just presupposing something exists. Right? You're presupposing the world. You don't have to presuppose your subjective experience. It happens to you. And if you attempt to deny it, you experience it in the denial of the experience. It's a vicious circle. It's sort of like the Cartesian idea, I am thinking, therefore I am. While you're thinking, if you doubt your thinking, you are actually doing the thinking that sort of grounds the fact that you're there. Some kind of thinking is going on. Now, anything beyond that you might be able to call into question, but that kind of, whether or not people agree with that, and there's debates about whether or not that's a deductive thing or deductive argument or more of an intuition, and it goes into weird directions. But when he's trying to tell Brenda, oh, that's just oh, that's irrelevant. No, it's not. I mean, the idea here really should be like, okay, if you have to know what the source is of the ultimate grounding of all reality is, right? In order to claim to know anything, which is what they're doing. That's how any of their knowledge is based on. It seems to me that they're skipping over subjective experience, which is something that Darth is constantly teaching these guys. Your autonomous reasoning is bad. You can't trust your autonomous reasoning. But your autonomous reasoning, aka your subjective experience and your ability to negotiate the world around you, that's part of you experiencing God's general revelation. So that seems like a massive contradiction.
That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about whether or not something is necessarily the case, not whether or not you know it. That's irrelevant. That's a deflection.
If something is, then necessarily it exists.
Okay, Brendan, do you understand what I'm telling you or not?
I think I just responded to you.
Okay. Do you accept? Let me get this straight. Do you accept? Okay, that that the metaphysical framework is either going to necessarily exist or necessarily not exist? Do you accept that?
That doesn't really make any sense because, I mean, is he trying to do it like a true dichotomy with something that abstract? Like, I mean, I guess you could. Either a metaphysical foundation exists or a metaphysical foundation does not exist. Okay, what kind of metaphysical foundation, though? I guess would be my question. This is one of the reasons why I do not like the word metaphysics, because I think it sucks, and I think that Christians have waddled over to it and helped themselves to it so they can use it like a cudgel. It's pathetic.
I don't hear the argument for that.
I just gave it to you.
No, you didn't.
So you don't accept the argument?
You made claims. You didn't make an argument.
What was the argument? So let's do it this way. What was the argument I gave to you?
You claimed that there simply has to be a necessary ultimate foundation to existence.
Yeah, and why? No, I didn't say that. I didn't say there has to be a necessary ultimate foundation to existence. That's not what I said.
Isn't that entailed by what you've been saying, though? I mean, JRobin, come on. That's so strange.
Well, then
so you weren't listening. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I did say. I'm going to tell you what I did say. I'm going to tell you what I did say. This time, listen with your ears, not with your mouth, and then respond in part. Okay.
So this, you can kind of gauge. I think I'm starting to see a tell here. It seems like you can gauge JRobin's endurance in a discussion. I mean, I'm sure he thinks he's having like a formal debate. Maybe he's even picturing himself on a stage. And it's not Brenda he's arguing with; it's Christopher Hitchens. He's shouting Christopher Hitchens into hell. The power of Christ compels thee. But he gets extra. When he starts talking about you need to calm down, and he starts using that kind of shit, the kind of passive aggressive, abusive shit, the emotional manipulation, which he's not very good at because it's very transparent that he's irritated, and he's trying to take it out on someone by irritating them, by trying to get them to react first. That lets him off the hook. He's starting with Brenda. He's losing it.
So, what I said with response to why a metaphysical framework is necessary is because there is no parameter outside of this ultimate framework that we're referring to that this thing is going to be beholden to, because it itself would be the grounds and the source for all contingency. Okay, so we're not dealing with something that's like how many what the lottery numbers are going to be for next week. Okay, that's contingent on several other parameters. Okay, we're not dealing with that kind of a thing here. We're dealing with something that's foundational, that's ultimate, and it's going to be the source of all contingency. Okay, it itself would be necessarily the case or not the case. Now, do you accept what I just said? If not, you're going to have to give a rebuttal. So do you accept what I said?
Wouldn't a necessary thing produce necessary facts?
Do you accept what I just said? Do you accept what I just said?
Contingent facts can't rely on a necessary thing. They would be necessary, not contingent.
Yeah, this is kind of a sticky one. I'm not exactly sure about this because I know that there's a couple ways of looking at this, but where Brenda is kind of getting into, and this is where, and people have pointed this out before. I know Jack Angstreich has pointed this out, and I think Jack and Brenda have gotten into some pretty heated arguments in the past. I don't know what their record is, but somebody had made mention of that in the comments. But anyway, the Angstreich has argued that there is an entailment coming from the way Darth Dawkins and maybe JRobin too, the way they argue this form of precept that they're attempting leads to a kind of necessitarianism where, and to me it seems to follow the God that they're talking about, it would have to make the world the way that it did. It couldn't have made the world in any way other than it did, which starts to, I think, remove some of its agency. It actually starts to entail things theologically, not philosophically, but theologically, for guys like Darth Dawkins and JRobin that I think they would be uncomfortable with, right? Because that God wouldn't really be, the world as manifested would be more like an experience God is having and couldn't have had otherwise. It's contingent upon it, but he didn't choose it. So when they talk about things like God's will and his love and his special plan and his purpose for us all, none of that stuff could really, I mean, I guess it could apply in a way, but a lot of it would be humans projecting and anthropomorphizing things onto a God that couldn't have done otherwise. That's an uncomfortable spot to be, especially if you're a Christian.
Do you accept what I just said?
So I don't understand it. Could you put it into a formal syllogism? A formal
syllogism?
Structure? Syllogism.
I just gave it to you. That what we're talking about is not beholden. What we're talking about when it comes to a metaphysical framework, it's not going to be beholden to other parameters. Do you accept that?
No.
I mean, all he's talking about is a completely independent being. He's talking about an entity that exists, that is ase, right? It exists in and of itself, independent of everything. But then when he talks about it being the absolute grounds for all being, the metaphysical foundation for every contingent thing that also exists in the universe, that's when that thing, that ase being, starts to sound more like less of a being and more like a kind of a force field, or some kind of single string theory, that kind of thing. It's almost more, it's just it's a pattern of quantum fields, and it just and this is how things unveil.
Oh, I need an argument for that.
That a metaphysical framework is not beholden to other parameters?
Yeah, why?
It's analytically true because of the nature of metaphysical frameworks.
But now, I mean, JRobin at this point, I really think is just talking out of his ass. I've never read anything that sounds like this. This just sounds like complete and total dribble.
Oh, so it's just by definition.
Yes, literally.
So,
right. So he's defining something into existence by saying, well, it's metaphysical and it's foundational, therefore you have to accept it. Right. But that doesn't make any sense. Right. Because a lot of the other stuff that he's trying to say, well, we can use logic to do all these things, but logic wouldn't let you do that. Right. And one of the odd things about that is, well, it's actually in one of the videos later on. There's actually a little bit of that with One Way that Tom Rabbit did a video on, where he kind of really makes a mess out of several philosophical concepts. It seems like these guys want to, like, for the longest time while they've been doing this stuff, they've been wanting to harvest these philosophical concepts, like, and take them as their own. Like, Christianity is the rational position, and we have the monopoly on logic because. Right, but the only way they can say that is to do an enormous is basically an enormous amount of special pleading. They're logical because they get logic from God, right? But they can't use their logic to prove that that's the case, and that's a problem. I think it makes them cranky.
Yeah, so you're just defining God into existence again.
No, I didn't say. When did I say God?
Well, that's what your ultimate metaphysical framework
No, I didn't
is.
say God here, Brendan. I didn't say God. I said metaphysical ultimate, and that could be anything.
God.
Brendan, listen. You're going to need to listen and focus. This is the thing that's plaguing so many atheists. They don't know how to focus. They don't know how to listen. Okay, so you're going to need to try to do that here today. Okay, you're going to need to make an effort to do that. Okay, it's by virtue of what it means to be a metaphysical framework or a worldview. Okay, that what we're talking about here is going to be the source of all contingency, so that it itself would not be beholden to other parameters. Do you accept what I just said?
No, because I think that if the source of all contingency is necessary, then all contingency is necessary.
That doesn't have anything to do with what I just said.
JRobin is getting upset that Brenda is playing this game better than him.
That is directly to what you said.
No, it doesn't. No, it does not. What does it have to do with whether or not the ultimate is necessarily the case or necessarily not the case? What does it have to do with that?
Because I think that your inference is bad. Because if
I didn't listen, Brendan, listen,
then the necessary things.
Listen.
Yeah, where Brenda's going with this, I think anyone can see it. Like, if the source of all contingent things is a necessary thing, everything contingent had to come about that way. Now there might be a way to get around that. Yeah, it's not worth the tangent.
Listen, cannot be contingent.
Brendan,
they have to be necessary.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about at all. Okay? Nothing. What I'm talking about is the metaphysical framework itself. Not what
I'm not. Yeah, and I agree with you, Mickey D. He says we all know he's talking about his God, and I wish they would just do that. I wish they would stop referring to the God they believe in as a metaphysical foundation, the ultimate grounding for everything, the source of all possibility. It's Jesus. You believe it's Jesus, and you think that everything is here is because he willed it to be. And now you guys are trying to jump into these weird, sort of esoteric disciplines of philosophy to try to like rationalize a theory of some kind of metaphysical theory and kind of like reverse engineer that into God, like kind of build Jesus an exoskeleton to make him, to kind of shore him up against skeptics. This is such a stupid way of doing this. Like the easiest way to spread your faith is to tell people about what your faith does, right? And most faiths, their strength is in either some aspect of their message, usually intangible elements, and community. Almost all of them have a community. If they don't have some kind of community connection to them, the religion usually falls apart. It's people that make religion work, and it's people that make a God work. That's why I think people ask me if JRobin asks me again, God does not exist because people make them up. People make gods up. Then we make them up because for whatever reason we're kind of psychotic. We seem to think that we need some kind of transcendent or otherworldly or super special reason just to get together. And maybe we do sometimes. But the idea that we have to, the idea that we adjust our focus onto something other than ourselves for a little bit and we all do it collectively is sort of like a group meditation. In that case, there might be something beneficial to that. There's oftentimes, many times, and you see this with Christians and cults, Darth Dawkins' cult included, where things go horribly wrong. Although they don't really have a sense of community because they're just sort of kind of feeding off each other's, narcissistic personality disorders. And yeah.
What, not the other thing, you're trying to go into this modal collapse thing. We're not talking about that right now. Okay. We're talking about whether or not something that the metaphysical framework is necessarily or not necessarily. Now, when it comes to necessarily, I mean in the sense that it's not going to be beholden to other parameters in the same way that a contingent fact would be. Okay. So
but you just did that by definition, right?
In this framework or in this discussion, we're talking about metaphysical frameworks. That's what we're referring to. We're referring to a fact or some ultimacy that is not beholden to other facts. Do you accept that?
Your definition? No, I don't accept your definition.
Do you accept that that's what we're talking about here?
I don't accept your definition.
Do you accept that's what we're talking about? Listen, Brendan.
I like what he's doing here. Like he asks Brenda if she accepts the definition, and she's no. Do you accept that's what we're talking about here? What the hell kind of question? I mean, Brenda could just say like, I accept the fact that that's what you want to talk about here, but I don't agree with it at all. Which is exactly what Brenda said, just a different way. But as usual, JRobin is not listening. He's too busy misgendering Brenda and messing up. It seems to me, and maybe somebody else can maybe work this out if they care about it. It seems to me like he's a couple points, and I wish I was a little sharper for this. I think in a couple cases he's done some things that have kind of maybe violated some of Darth Dawkins' parts of his script. Maybe not. He's stuck to kind of the basics where he's just basically really trying to bludgeon Brenda with the whole "it's ultimate, you have to accept it. If you don't, you're an idiot" kind of crap. So maybe not.
When we're talking about ultimacies, when we're talking about a metaphysical framework, we're talking about something that all things derive and depend upon. Do you understand what I'm telling you here?
I understand that you're defining.
Okay, good. That's it. That's all I need to know. Now, by virtue of it being ultimate, it means it's not going to be beholden to other parameters, right?
I'm listening.
Correct?
By definition, yes.
Right. Okay. So then when we're talking about something that
I think this is kind of interesting. Let me take a look here. The metaphysical ground is not beholden to anything. However, God has a nature which it can't violate. Therefore, God is beholden to its nature, which is a contradiction in their worldview. Yeah, I think that's that's an interesting take on that. And that's something that's come up a couple of times. But yeah, I'll have to ponder that a little bit.
That all facts derive and depend upon, which itself would be in the context of a metaphysical framework. Okay, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Okay, now in the case of God, you're going to have to, because God is in that kind of a category of that which is ultimate, you're going to have to show necessarily that God does not exist. You're going to have to falsify him by virtue of positing maybe another worldview that would falsify the existence of God and show that grounds intelligibility, knowledge, etc.
Those are two different things. You can show, I believe I've seen them. You can have an intelligible, and that's sort of the contradiction there. You can actually create a logically valid argument where it follows that a God either doesn't exist or, in all possible worlds is impossible. It's impossible for that being to exist. Now, obviously, that's not a sound argument, but you could build one like that. You could build a probably valid argument, and that's all you need is the premises to, the conclusion to follow. So if you're capable of creating that, and it's intelligible, and it's logical, how is it godly? So to me, I find it odd with this, and this is making me want to go back to one of my original counters to this argument. How do these guys, when talking about this, account for lying in their worldview? Because it doesn't sound like it should be possible. Because if this being is, contingent upon everything, then dishonesty would have to be built into it. And you could demonstrate that by giving a valid, logical argument that where it follows that a God does not exist. Well, okay, it's logical and it's intelligible. Well, shit. Does that mean it's true? Obviously, for a Christian, they're going to say it's not. Well, then how did you do that? How do you account for that?
Okay. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I understand. So
good. So how did you falsify God?
I don't accept your metaphysical framework.
Oh, yeah. So how did you falsify it? The fact that you don't accept it doesn't mean it's false. So how did you falsify it?
Because I don't accept your metaphysical framework.
That doesn't mean it's false. So how did you falsify it?
I don't have to. You're just.
You believe it's false, correct? You believe the framework I hold is false, right? You believe the God framework is false, right? Brendan, you need to focus, Brendan. Brendan, you believe it's false, right? Correct?
I never said it was false. I said I don't accept it.
Do you believe it's false that God exists? That God exists?
I believe that all of the arguments in favor of God fail.
Brendan, I'm going to give you one more chance because you've been invading this entire time. That's not what I asked you, and you know it. Do you believe that God does not exist?
I'm an agnostic atheist. So I
do you believe that God does not exist, Brendan?
So if you could stop misgendering me, that would be nice.
Brendan, I'm not misgendering you.
Okay. So she's finally brought it up, and they've been talking to each other for just over 15 minutes. They don't have much longer to go. And she's finally brought this up, and he's been doing it noticeably because he caught himself and corrected himself. One time he said Brenda, and he caught himself and reversed it back to, and that's the bad thing. He's misgendering her. I don't think Brendan is Brenda's dead name. He's just turning Brenda into a masculine name to misgender her, to screw with her. So here we go. He's saying that's not what he's doing. What is he doing?
No, I'm not at all. You know, and you know it too. Brendan, do you know or do you believe that God does not exist?
I'm an agnostic atheist, so I deny.
I want a yes or no answer to the question because people like to use agnostic and atheist in many different complicated ways and convoluted ways. So I want to get a clear answer to the question here. Do you? I'm going to give you one more chance. Do you believe, Brendan, that God does not exist?
Your Christian God? No, I don't believe that.
Somebody asked you again. Okay, I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to give you one more chance. This is going to be the final chance. I defined God already. Okay. Do you believe, and I'll do it again just to make sure we're clear. God is defined as the ultimate mind. All things derived depend upon this mind, creator, creation, distinction. Do you believe that God does not exist?
I don't know why he works that thing in there that way, right? He says it's an ultimate being and everything is dependent upon it. Creator, creature distinction. I don't know why he shovels that in there. Usually, I think Darth usually invokes the whole creator creature distinction when he's trying to get somebody to, when he's trying to challenge somebody on how they would ground ethics or morals or something like that. Occasionally, I don't know why these guys don't keep it simple, right? It's the same thing. God's ultimate. God made everything. You need to shut up and acknowledge it. That's really all they're doing.
I have no good reason to believe that.
All right. Thank you for your time, Brendan. Thank you for your time. Yeah, we're not doing this. Okay, I really should have cut this off a long time earlier.
Yeah, why didn't you though, JRobin? And why did you thank Brenda for her time? Like, I don't understand why do these guys talk like this? Like, if you're gonna be a dick, own it. Own it. You really get in there, and especially if you're gonna misgender somebody, why don't you just come right out and really start up with the hate speech, see if you can get yourself kicked off Clubhouse.
Okay, but I humored it for a little bit because maybe I thought there was going to be some productive conversation, but obviously that was not the case. Let me see something here. Yeah, no, Matt, I completely agree. Trolls are in full force today, of course, right? As usual. But we had the Brendan coming in here like normal, like he usually does, and causing the normal confusion and everything that he normally likes to do. So yeah, we're not having that right now.
We're not having that, right? You just had that for 16 minutes. So you fail to convince a person and it's their fault. You're a great salesperson, Tom, right? What do these guys do for work? I mean, I wonder how many of these guys are just like dependents, in some capacity, either, family, friends, and for whatever reasons. People have different circumstances. Some people, hit hard times. I'm not trying to blame them for that. But the way these guys fucking talk, if they're not self-sufficient individuals, because a lot of these guys are politically conservative on top of it, if they're not self-sufficient, just, the hypocrisy. But who knows? Maybe, JRobin sounds like he's perfectly capable of functioning in a workplace, as long as you don't talk to him about religion or politics. Yeah, yikes. All right, stop that one. Good Lord. All right, we're going to switch over. We're going to end that one. And this was Brenda's second attempt at talking with some Christians, at least that Tom Rabbit recorded. This one is going to be over on, like I said, I think this is Nate's clubhouse, one of his rooms. That's an interesting title. Ask a Christian Room explains why they must misgender Brenda. And to be fair, I mean, so I think somebody actually pointed out, well, it's not the entire room that does it. Yeah, okay. I don't think it is. I actually think it's guiding progressing or something like that, but you'll see. All right, here we go.
Go ahead, Nate.
Well, yeah, in the interest of moving on, Brenda, what's up? What level of heretic are you today? Just kidding. Hi, hello. How are you? We've been talking about heresy for the last hour and a half.
Well, I have a different subject, so I was just waiting till.
Yeah, go ahead.
Felix, if you're gonna comment, could you maybe comment something that makes sense? Like, I mean, there are atheists who are transphobes, but unless you can identify somebody in here who's an atheist and a transphobe, maybe stop trying to just like, okay, these guys are actually Christians who are transphobes. and I can argue for it here shortly. And I think that's probably going to be as much as I talk to you from here on out. For anyone else, if that guy gets obnoxious, kick him. But otherwise, you know, if he's, well, I should define that. If he starts getting hateful, boot him. If he's, I fully expect him to be obnoxious. That's not necessarily bootable.
Why are online Christians, and particularly Protestants, such bigots? I run into bigotry from Christians on a daily basis on this platform. They're homophobic, transphobic, sexist, even racist at times, and anti-Semitic. And
Yes.
so why is it that Christians seem to have such low moral character?
So I'm sure everyone's like ready to jump all over that, but I would first say, instead of Christians, you just say people, right? So Christian, religious, non-religious. Hang on. I understand.
No, he doesn't.
Hold on. I'm walking us down this path. So just to set us off on the right foot, I understand you're specifically wanting to know about Christians. Hang on, Calvin is getting feedback.
Okay. Oh, he's acknowledging it.
About Christians, but I'm just pointing out the bigger issue that I will address this, but it's also people at large, right? Christians are not the only ones that fall into the categories of bigot you mentioned.
That is completely irrelevant, and that is a way of blurring the distinction so as to just brush it away. Well, all humans can be bigots, so therefore Christians don't have a problem with it. No, here's the problem, though, right? Brenda's observation is that she's noticing that when she experiences transphobia and homophobia and even occasionally misogyny and open racism in these clubhouse channels, she's experiencing it. She's hearing it from Christians specifically. And when Nate even pushed back with the whole thing, well, let's get to the bigger issue here. All people can struggle, you know, or can be bigots. And like, no, I'm talking about that particular group. And he still continues to try to erase the distinction. There's a major problem with that, Nate, especially if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian and this particular group is demonstrating stuff like that, and for outside people, what they're seeing is hate speech and nastiness and backbiting and infighting and insults and condescension, swearing, you know, what are some of the other ones? Slandering, reviling, you know, good ones. Those are not fruits of the Spirit. And if you're a Christian, you believe that your heart is regenerated. You are now a spiritual person, right? Or a spiritually renewed person, or in the process of spiritual renewal. The Holy Spirit is working something in you to bring about those fruits of the Spirit. We should see things like peace and love and understanding and gentleness and kindness and charity and all these kinds of things. Brenda's not. Okay, and that's specific to your group because your group can make a claim that they should be demonstrating more of the good stuff. And Brenda's asking, why is she seeing more of the bad?
Do you think that liberal denominations and liberal Christians are Christians?
We can talk about that, but that's also not Calvinist.
So you don't. I take that pause as a no.
I don't think I paused. I said we can talk about that, but no, that's not what I said at all. Yeah, progressing.
I was just.
If he wants to engage Calvinist, or if he thinks that Calvinists are being,
it's she. So don't misgender me, please.
My apologies. I must speak truth. And I shouldn't even apologize.
This is what I mean. This is bigotry right here.
So
is that me?
Here's why I say that. Because that's
I think that was Nate that said that. Is that me? Like why is this guy trying to slither out of blame? Like this is so strange.
Actually, is a shining example that just popped up out of the blue right now.
Well, I'm not screaming and yelling. I'm just saying.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I wasn't going to enter. You are such a hypocrite. Okay. How? If you can demonstrate how, I would be more than happy to hear it. If you try to say it's because I discriminate against Christians, that would be a tall order. Because what we're doing here is talking about things that they believe and the things that they say, things that they do. I'm not in here saying that I dislike Christians by virtue of them being Christians. In fact, there are a lot of Christians that I like. People that believe. They disagree with my views. I disagree with theirs, but we get along just fine. I don't hold their particular faith. They're people of other faiths that I like and can get along with perfectly fine and enjoy their enjoy their opinions on these kinds of things and take their criticisms to heart. And they're not, they're in a faith tradition, and I can't really claim one. So I think that your problem is that you think that I'm a hypocrite because I'm saying critical things about people that represent this faith, and I'm saying critical things about the faith itself. So if you're secure in your faith, maybe you could listen to what I'm saying and that people like me, and maybe roll it around a little bit. And if you think that we're wrong or that we're deceived, give it up to the Lord. And maybe don't engage in this kind of thing, because I'm pretty sure that if you read First Peter, you're not supposed to be. So if your Bible has any weight and it's important to you, maybe you should read it. And maybe you should do what those particular books have instructed Christians to do, what the expectations are of your behavior. Because I have read those expectations, and what you're doing in here isn't it. And that's an atheist telling you how you're not shaping up as a good Christian. So go to church.
Yeah.
Also, become a Catholic. Give up on this fundy Protestant nonsense on the internet. Get yourself a real church. Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic. Pick one of the two.
Brenda, it is considered hateful for me to speak truth. And I cannot change that. I will not change what is true and what is false in order to please men, because that's called idolatry. And this is the problem, I think, when people are talking to quote unquote Calvinists. Calvinists are generally thought of in Christendom, if you want to use that term, to be very staunchly biblical. And am I saying that everyone has to be Calvinist? Absolutely not. Well, I've made that clear millions of times. One of my greatest friends on here, Malik, right now is quite far away from where I stand theologically. And he's my
No one cares progressing. What is your point?
Brother in Christ wholeheartedly, just to give you a microcosmic example right now. But that's a perfect example, right? So if, Brenda, what you mean by bigotry, air quotes, if that definition is anything that you don't affirm me in is wrong, is that what you mean by bigotry?
Well, I mean, you misgendering me is a transphobia, right? And it is not truth.
That has to do with being afraid of you. That has to do with speaking truth.
That's not what the word transphobia means.
Nope.
There's nothing to do with some type of an
homophobia. Homophobia doesn't mean you're afraid of homosexuals. That's not what it means. It's just how the word is.
It's sad that these terms have been around for a long time, and these guys are still trying to come up with like, well, I don't understand what you mean. I'm not scared of gay people. Like, that's not what homophobia is. It's about you being irrationally hateful, having an irrational, hateful reaction towards this group of people for reasons that, probably don't make a lot of sense. And really, if you think about it, there really is no reason for it, right? Christians usually will justify this sort of, part of their reaction to homosexuality can be ingrained in them because of their religious upbringing, right? They've just been told that it's, it's evil and strange and not. But then again, so is masturbation and sex before marriage and any of this other kind of stuff. Like there's lots of things wrong with sex depending on what particular religious upbringing that you have. But a lot of these people find their ways around it, and there are plenty of religious leaders that find their ways to get their jollies off in abusive ways too. So again, one of those things where you have this kind of evil being perpetrated by Christians whose hearts are supposed to be embiggened by the Holy Spirit. Sorry for the word embiggened, but Simpsons fan. So yeah, when Brenda brings this up, I think this is good. Like, she's like, no, this is kind of a demonstration of transphobia here, because there's no reason. The only reason that you would have to what progressing is essentially trying to say is my book tells me that I have to combat your wordplay because you're trying to cast a spell on me or something. And I'm going to use the Bible because it's the truth. I was like, no, it's not the truth. Her name is Brenda. And those are the pronouns that she wants to be identified with. There's nothing false about that. It's just weird. It's just these guys not being able to make sense of the idea that gender and sex are different. That's it. And because that confuses them and makes them angry, they have to do this sad, again, more performative, conservative, traditional Christian horseshit.
Yes, but the word means something else.
Okay, well, I'm
right?
telling you in all honesty and in love of truth, I will not participate and give credence to something that is untrue. That would be blasphemy.
Well, that's wrong. It is true.
According to who?
According to how words work, right? My gender is feminine, and so the appropriate pronoun are feminine pronouns.
Brenda,
that's my gender. It's not. I don't say that. I don't say that my sex is female. I'm not confused about my genitals.
Brenda,
I'm not confused about my gender. They're different. They're different things, and
Brenda,
you misgendering me is a lie.
Brenda, for sake of brevity, I'm telling you, your lecture against misgendering you is going to fall on deaf ears because I'm never going to heed it. I'm just telling you.
There you go. So yeah, so this is a person who is dedicated to not listening to the opinion of this particular person because it must be false because of the Bible. Where in the Bible does it say anything like this? Now, there is stuff from Paul about, they'll try to use that, the stuff. I don't know how they get from trans, from the stuff about two men lying together being an abomination and worthy of a capital punishment, to trans people. I can't use your pronouns. I can't do that for you because what you're asking me to do is to engage in a lie. I don't understand this. It makes no sense to me. And actually, here's the thing. If it really is the case that, and this is something that they should be concerned about. Gender and sex are two different things. They're insisting that it's not, right? What they're basing that on is the fact that they think that their facts about gender and sex being exactly the same thing is informed by their, quote, biblical worldview, right? They're wrong about that because there's plenty of people out there, and there's experts in this area that show sex and gender are distinct things. So they're actually engaging in dishonesty in order to and claiming that it's integrity. It's really kind of fascinating.
Because you're a bigot.
No, you're a confused person, Brenda.
So you can call me a bigot all day long. I don't care if you call me. What I care about, and see, this is what's going to offend you, but offense according to the gospel is necessary. It's a necessary consequence of a world dead in trespasses and sin. So if I offend,
what was confusing about how I laid out the difference between sex and gender?
Brenda, again, I'm not sure why you're trying to engage me. I just told you that you're not going to change my mind on that.
Well, no, I understand, but I want to discuss why you deliberately choose to confuse sex with gender.
I am not here to discuss newspeak. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to.
That is not newspeak.
Faith. I'm here to talk.
This is just science, dude. It's just science. There's a difference between sex and gender. Don't you realize that?
To have a conversation with someone about all of this newspeak, all of this new scientific jargon that's been reintroduced and manipulated to fit whatever you want it to fit. That's fine. You can do that, but I'm not the person you want to do that with.
So this is what I'm talking about. This scientific illiteracy and ignorance of just basic scientific facts about human beings and human psychology. This is just human psychology 101, and you're ignorant.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. He's just ignorant of this, but he's basically celebrating. I'm like, nope, I'm right. The Bible says that gender and sex are the exact same thing. Like, really, where?
You're committing idolatry with yourself, Brent.
To be fair, he's not actually saying that, but he is sort of grounding his position in some kind of biblical foundation. Most of the time, these guys would have to turn to Scripture in order to ground that, and the only thing they could really turn to. Actually, there is an interesting way of doing this. He could turn to a particular translation of something that Paul talks about, but in doing so, he would change the meaning of it so that it would take another group of people. It would let another group of people off the hook, and if it didn't let them off the hook, it would conflate two groups of people needlessly and would also be inaccurate. So I have to look into that. I will do a little digging into that.
And here's the reason I tell you that, because of the fact that you're a human being that's created in God's image. Okay, you have inherent value, you have inherent worth, because you reflect the glory of your Creator, who is the one true God of the universe. But as it stands right now, you're suppressing that truth of God in your unrighteousness because you love your sin, because you've wrapped your entire identity up into yourself. You have left God out of the equation. You suppress the truth of God.
Why is it sin for me to be the who God?
I would like to know, so that little bit of theology that he just tried to lay on Brenda there is kind of interesting. How is that any different than any other sinner? Like that almost felt like what Brenda's doing in his eyes is an extra special sin. But how is that any different than any other sinner, right? A lot of these guys, I don't know if Progressing in Nate, if they're totally mobbed up in the Darth Dawkins crew. I know that they've been in rooms with him before. Actually, Felix, I think, is right there in that group. I wonder if that's the same Felix that's here in the live chat. But any of these ding dongs that and to be fair, I'm not calling them ding dongs because they're Christians. I'm calling them ding dongs because they've said some stuff that has demonstrated their ding dongness. Where was I? Oh, to hell with it.
God made me.
God didn't make you that way.
Yeah,
No,
he did.
didn't.
Yeah,
Can I
no,
ask
the
Brenda a
science.
question?
You're behind on the science.
So if I
Yes.
could maybe jump in here, hot button topic. So just maybe a couple perspectives. To one side, by the way, what Progressing said, I'll say that all day long. I may say it differently, but I totally agree with it. So what Brenda's saying, Brenda, to your point, maybe I've always often wondered, right? Because the Bible does speak about some sins just point blank directly. Then there's other things that fall in like gray or very gray territory that you have to rely. The royal you, the person that actually cares and believes in God, has to rely on their conscience being led by the Holy Spirit with. So I've always often wondered about transgender issues, like so by the way, the person that doesn't believe in God and doesn't care about sin or doesn't think it's real, you do you, go crazy. But to the person that say would be a Christian or a Christ follower and also put themselves in the transgender category, I've also wondered, right? Because it's an easy answer for a Christian to say, well, God didn't make you that way. You should.
To check something.
Maybe. I've always often wondered, right? Because the Bible does speak about some sins just point blank directly. Then there's other things that fall in like gray or very gray territory that you have to rely.
But it depends on the sins and the infractions. If you're going with Old Testament books, you have ceremonial laws and things like that. That you have to read that in context and find out what's getting left behind. The Christians have a weirder burden that they have to entertain because there's the whole development that happens after Christ's death and resurrection, and then the ministry begins with them dealing with to what extent does the old law apply? So which sins are we supposed to be paying attention to? Do you have to be kosher for the Gentiles? Nope. So, but that's ceremonial stuff that changed with the new covenant. Okay, well, how much did and how much didn't? Most of these guys will try to appeal to. Now there's some kind of bedrock where there's this sort of these objective morals that never changed. Like that one's a little harder for them to prove.
The royal you, the person that actually cares and believes in God, has to rely on their conscience being led by the Holy Spirit with. So I've always often wondered about transgender issues, like so by the way, the person that doesn't believe in God and doesn't care about sin or doesn't think it's real, you do you, go crazy. But to the person
that's not a good thing for Nate to say as a Christian. He should not be saying things like that. That's a weird thing to say, right? He believes in God and he believes in sin, right? So he's telling people, and as a Christian, he's supposed to, present, part of the Great Commission. Although the Great Commission, I think, is really meant for the apostles. But a lot of Christians believe they have a responsibility to spread this message. So Nate just kind of being flippant and saying, hey, you know what? If you don't believe in God and you don't believe in sin, go nuts. Here's the thing, though. What I find odd about this, though. So what if, in response to Nate's statement there, his flippant, glib statement, you do you and you go nuts? My thinking is that Nate's thinking like that person can run off and join a sex cult and spend the rest of their lives living in the nude, setting their hair on fire, running around having sex with animals for all I care, right? You do you, right? But what if that particular person doesn't believe in God because they just don't? Maybe they've never considered it. They don't think of things like sin, but they do think about things that are like good and evil, and they believe in being good to people. And that person ends up getting married. Let's say that they're cisgender, right? And they end up getting married in a straight relationship, and they have sex after marriage. They have kids, and they live a dedicated life with each other, and they take care of their family, and they raise their kids up well. Then they're loving and charitable and giving to everybody that they can be, and they live a very fulfilling life, and they raise their kids up, and their kids kind of have the same lives. Did that person who didn't believe in God and didn't care about sin just go do him or do her? You just go nuts, right? But that person is destined for hell, the same as any raging serial killer that you could see in a movie or a television show, according to Nate's religion. That person is just as damnable as Hannibal Lecter or Patrick Bateman from American Psycho.
Say would be a Christian or a Christ follower and also put themselves in the transgender category. I've also wondered, right? Because it's an easy answer for a Christian to say, well, God didn't make you that way. You should change or not change that part of your body. And then I can see the trans person saying, well, what part shouldn't I change, my body or my brain, right? Because one of them would have to be changed or whatever to match the other, to match who they really express themselves as, right? So I've often thought, just to consider that perspective, it has nothing to do with theology, but just from maybe approaching it a different way. Because if you're born a certain way but you feel a different way, well, that's your brain. So are you saying I'm supposed to change my brain because if I leave it the same? That's a problem. Well, if I change my body, well, that's a problem. So one of them has to change. So if you don't change your body, you are changing your brain. So either way, something's getting changed.
I changed my body. I changed my body.
Excellent reference, Grimania. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he's like. Is he trying to tell Brenda that he has to reconcile one with the other? Like, I'm not exactly sure that that's a thing that someone has to do if they're trans.
Or you do nothing and go through life thinking you're not who you are. So for the Christian, though, for the outside.
Wait a minute. Okay, so if sorry, that wait a minute thing is kind of my brother's thing. Would he be willing to accept any transsexual individual, any trans man or trans woman, as long as they've either had some kind of change of the necessary change of brain, quote unquote, to make them think, oh no, I'm actually a man or a woman, or they have the physical change necessary to match how they identify as their gender. Like, as long as they take the effort to physically change their sex to match their gender, is he willing to accept that? I don't think Nate knows what he's doing here.
Observer, I would say that biblically speaking, I mean, we know like homosexuality is a sin, right? So that has nothing to do with trans issues. If it does, like, if you're a trans woman who now likes women, or if you're a trans man who now likes men or likes women, whatever, wherever you fall, if homosexuality is an issue, then the Bible outright speaks to that. But, assuming you're celibate and having sex with no one and it's not an issue, then as far as trans and, are you this way? Are you supposed to be this way? Change your body, change your...
Exactly, Lucky Wolfen. Yeah, he's assuming a lot here and speculating. He could just ask Brenda questions. I'm sure she can furnish him. Well, she's not going to give him tons of details, nor should she. And Marty, the correction of she. I wasn't referring to Brenda. I was referring to a hypothetical individual in that tangential rambling argument that I was given. But yeah, no. No, I don't understand where he's going here with this, and I don't remember how Brenda responds. So I'm looking forward to this.
Your brain, well, that has to fall, I believe, firmly between you and God. So if you believe in a God, be very careful and work out your salvation with fear and trembling. But if you don't believe in a God, then all of this is moot. Go crazy.
That is not at all helpful, Nate. How on earth is someone like Brenda supposed to approach that particular religion when the community of believers That's how this thing got started. The community of believers that she's encountering on this particular social media platform is hostile towards her. So, how, I don't. This makes no sense. Oh, well, you need to reconcile your gender with your sex and with God, if God's real. If you think God's real. If you don't think God's real, then I guess you don't have to worry about it. Okay, but the biggest issue for Brenda as a trans woman is dealing with how the world accepts her and reacts to her. And that was what she was calling out here. Just on Clubhouse, she ends up encountering a lot of this, and she's encountering it from Christians. And Christians seem to feel pretty confident because of their faith. They could lash out at trans folk and other members of the LGBTQ community.
So the science says
if you want an example of somebody who really feels entitled to lash out at the LGBTQ community, go take a look at Smokey Saint's channel. Guy's disgusting.
Science says that my brain is feminine and is so from birth. That's what the science says.
Can I ask Brenda a question? Brenda.
Sure, Felix.
Brenda, were you born with, okay, just hear me out. I just want to understand what you.
I was born male. I was born male, raised
so
male.
You were born with, born male, but you feel like a woman? Is that what it is?
I always identified as a woman, yes.
And so that makes you a woman because you identify as a woman.
Yes, and it's backed up with the science that says that my brain was feminized, very likely in the womb, and this is just something that happens, right?
So
it's a biological fact.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there. Hold on, everybody. Okay, Brenda, we're going to come back to you. There's new people on the stage. I want to get to them, and we'll come back to you. And just for the record, for those who don't know, science can't speak. Science doesn't say a darn thing, okay? It's the scientists who interpret what they call
but you're not understanding how words...
Okay, so Brenda, we'll come back to you, and if you can't be...
Brenda has been muted because Brenda... Yeah, I'm going to make this really stupid point about science not speaking. That's... Oh, my God. When Brenda made that point about them not understanding the science, she also made the point that they didn't really understand that this is an issue that's brought up in like Psychology 101 textbooks. Her claim essentially was that the science is kind of settled on this, at least the initial stuff. There's aspects to this. I mean, there's lots of different avenues that are still being explored about this because a lot of this stuff might involve the workings of the brain, and that's a huge frontier of science. But yeah, these guys have just kind of this to me is a perfect example of what is happening with modern Christianity and why it's dying.
Be quiet. I'll move you to the audience. Kyle, welcome, brother. Good to see you. And do you have a question, a topic, a thought? It can be on the current topic, anything at all. Welcome.
Hello. I feel like every time I come in here, it's a little spicy.
Yeah, they just got done misgendering and acting like transphobic bigots. Yeah. To a transphobic, to a trans woman, to a trans woman who was brave enough to go in there and call them on their bullshit. Like, hey, maybe police your own, because the stuff that she sees on here is not cool. But they're able to just kind of laugh that off. And I don't know who it was that kind of wrapped that thing up, but he kind of broomed her to the side, like, nope. That's enough of that. We're going to move on to something else. They'll probably go on to talk about how, oh God, whatever, is my salvation permanent? Like, nothing's permanent. Like if you're an immortal soul, then you're already going to live forever. The only question is where your soul is going to be sent, heaven or hell. As far as you dying or whatever, that's not really a thing. But this idea that, my salvation, like, knock that shit off. Christians need to be more confident in their faith. And the fact that a lot of this insecurity is playing out on here is, I think, kind of a testament to some of the stuff that's been kind of worn down by not only different arguments, but competing religions, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism. And I think Judaism has a lot of problems. Buddhism's better. But yeah, no, this stuff with the LGBTQ issues, this is where Christianity really falls apart, because most of what sort of has established Christianity as a tradition And the tradition is important. A lot of the Protestants and stuff will try to say that that's not important. They got away from the traditions of the Catholic Church, but they established their own, and they've got a lot of their own. They got a lot of baggage, and a lot of it's built on these ideas that homosexuality is a sin, and obviously being trans is a sin. So they really can't do anything about this, and they can't minister to people like this. And the churches that do, the Christians that do minister to this, have to do an enormous amount of tap dancing around the Bible to kind of get around it. To me, I think if you get to that point where you can kind of justify a faith in Christianity with being able to minister to all these groups that Christianity has kind of traditionally cast aside, and especially now where it's amongst Christians, it seems to have really gotten into a fever pitch. You're either on the side of the traditionalists, or you're these lukewarm Christians over here that just accept everybody or whatever, but you're all going to hell. Sorry, but that is kind of what they do. I don't know. The problem that I see with that is that if that particular group gets marginalized, and they're the ones actively reaching out and saying, no, there's a place for LGBTQ Christians, and maybe we can minister to them and we can help them. Maybe their ranks will grow. I don't know, but I really don't see how. I don't know how many LGBTQ Christians are out there, and I don't know how they would square like just the treatment. The majority of churches, from what I can tell, are just not. At least like the kind of definitely on the evangelical side, are not going this way. But if you go to like an Episcopalian church or something like that, I think it's less of an issue. So who knows? But all right, I've got a little bit of energy left in me, so I'm going to throw the link in the chat to see if anybody wants to come in and say hi real quick. I'm not going to say anything about how long I'm going to stay on, because I always say I'm not going to stay on for that long and then end up staying on for way too long. So I'll be on for as long as I'm on. I just posted that in the chat, but I'm waiting for the live chat on YouTube to kind of catch up. If that didn't go through. Oh. All right, just for a little bit. But yeah, if anyone else is interested in stopping in and saying hi, that's fine. Actually, I want to highlight this link. This is a good one. Thanks, Jason Torn, for this. Read The Gendered Brain by Lisa Elliott. Good advice. I will look it up. Hey, Richard, how are you doing?
Peace and respect. How you doing, brother?
Doing better. Slowly recovering from this illness that has kicked the crap out of me.
That doesn't sound like much fun.
No, I thought I had it. I thought I had it beat. I had some decent meds on it just before Christmas, and then it started kind of making its way back, and then it came back with a vengeance. Well, it was almost as bad the second time as it was the first time. And I don't know if it was like a secondary bacterial thing or what, or if it's just more virus. Wasn't COVID. Had that ruled out, but twice, in fact, got tested twice during this whole thing. But yeah, still clearing up. So I will be wrapping this up probably. Well, like I said, I shouldn't give any ETA on that.
I want to say that I think you're right about the confidence of people in their beliefs. But I mean, it's honest to doubt and try to disprove whatever it is you have a stance on. But I think the problem is that the reason that Christians are often so defensive is because they don't really have confidence in what they're saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. But I think a lot of the positions that other Christians have taken in the groups have pushed them into directions that they may not have ever gone. You know what I mean? If they'd never,
Sure.
Like, I mean, it's one of those things where you could. I think Pine Creek did this in one video where he was asking somebody, asking like either a Mormon or somebody who was raised in like a Pentecostal church. Like, imagine if you had been raised in an Episcopalian church. What do you think do you think you'd be inclined to some of the tendencies or to some of the religious beliefs that you are now? And it's a good question to ask, because I started thinking about that. Was probably the first thing that started causing doubt for me. Even after I kind of fell away from church attendance, I never doubted the existence of God. I never called it into question. But when I started wondering about, I wonder what would have happened if, when my parents got into religion in their early 20s, when I was just very little, and I'm like, what would have happened if they had started attending a Catholic church and become confirmed Catholics?
Well, it's an interesting observation, but I think it falls apart as soon as a person becomes an adult and really considers their own position. Sure, when you're a child, you're influenced by your parents. You just follow kind of whatever they do, whatever, But if a person, it could hold if a person doesn't ever seriously consider their position.
No, yeah,
Richard, can I say one thing?
We're all waiting for you, Peter.
Yeah, I find it extremely generous from you that you call the people that Jefferson reviews Christians.
Well, depending on the person, sometimes Richard would agree with you and say, yeah, I don't think that person's actually Christian.
Usually when I say Christian, I'm putting it in quotes because I don't think they're genuinely following the Bible.
Well, yeah, I'm not even sure if these people follow the Bible all the time.
We all know what you think about Christians, Peter.
Yeah. I think they're generally not following it, and when they are following it, it's only the parts that they agree with, or they're reading it in such a way that it agrees with them intrinsically anyway. So you might as well just write it yourself and then say, here is the Bible, and I agree with it. It's meaningless.
King cherry pick version.
Right.
By the way, I want to say hi to Alistair and Kevin Chaos. Good to see you guys.
Hello.
Kevin, did you have a little bit of drama earlier this week?
Yeah. So my regular channel, Kevin Chaos, was shut down. I had somebody rando come into my side chat by the name of and I should have known. Do you know me? Right.
Yeah.
And I let him in my stream and got porn bombed for a few seconds. So my channel is down. So I'm over at Trusty 8 Podcast.
Yeah, I that person has been in my live chat before, and they may have actually commented on a couple of my videos. So
yeah, and the comments they were making in the chats were like, relevant. It seemed normal, and I knew I'd seen them over here in Gur's streams too. So yeah, I think Titan Uranus was there, and a few other people that kind of witnessed the whole thing. So
yeah, because I saw a notification for the one video when you kind of announced what had happened, and I was like, well, who the hell did that? And then Titan sent me a message saying who it was, and I was like, I know that username. I'm pretty sure they've been on nuts. So now I'm a little nervous.
What I can't figure out is it's kind of interesting. You can get your channel taken down if somebody porn bombs you. And it's not even your fault. They do it, and you can go, okay, whatever. Or maybe you just didn't notice it, and then somebody else saying, oh shit. There was a video, it was a hangout that One Way was doing, and the guy didn't porn bomb One Way stream, he shit bombed it. He goes, hey, does this look okay? And he turned his cam on, and he had his phone, and he was recording what he had left in his toilet. He goes, does this look okay? So he literally One Way's stream.
Wow.
I can't help it, but I find that actually funny.
It gives new meaning to the term bathroom humor, right?
Yeah.
To be real, I did do that on my Facebook profile, my old Facebook profile years ago, but that was different context,
I want to know what he meant by okay.
That would be interesting.
I thought it'd be funny, but I would never do this. But somebody actually, and I'm sure probably somebody's done this. Normally if someone can think of it, it's probably been done. But I've
done something similar. So I don't know if you know if you
Peter.
Again.
Fucking Dutch bastards, man! I tell you.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is a thing only in the Netherlands or if it's done anywhere else,
Probably
but
older than
here in a urinal, there's a fly. So there's a drawing of a fly in the urinal for you to point at. It seems to work. Urinals are cleaner. And I was in a gas station bathroom. There was a huge fly flying around, and it landed in the urinal. So what I did is I took a picture and I sent it to my friends and said, "Which one do I aim at now?" So.
Wait, they actually have
That's
a
gross.
drawing. Wait, they actually have a drawing of a fly.
Yes.
That's on the inside of the urinal. So basically, a point
Yes.
of aim for your urine stream.
Yes, we're Dutch, remember?
Sure. Yep.
That's what we want to do if we piss. We want to kill flies.
Yeah,
but
because everybody
so
knows
if
that flies spread disease.
if it's a real one, it's going to be messy if it takes off.
Wait, is this a real problem where people can't pay attention for literally like 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently.
There's people that have problems peeing standing up. It's like you may want to just not do that anymore because you're
I've walked into a public restroom and just stepped in whole puddles of other men's urine. It's ridiculous.
I heard that in Germany, it's like if you go like it's not uncommon to find public restrooms where they have no urinals. They're just stalls, and you will get glared at if they realize that you walked into one of the stalls and peed standing up. Like, like the Germans are like, it's the opposite with like the U.S. Like, oh, as a man, you sit when you take a leak. Come on. With them, it's more like, you filthy horse. Were you spraying that crap all over the wall?
Yeah. What's kind of interesting is you could, like, when I worked at a nuclear plant in North Carolina for some time. And you could always tell the guys that when they were using the urinal and they were.
Why are we talking about this? Hang on a second. This is still live. Let's talk about this off air. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm making tea, and we're talking about urinal and differences between.
This is something that needs to be made public, though, Jeff.
Jefferson,
Yes, it's public.
You knew what you were getting into when you posted the link. A Dutch guy would enter this.
I was secretly hoping that you'd gotten bored and fallen asleep. So, all right, folks, we're gonna wrap this up, and then we're
Hopefully
gonna
the
take
Dutch man doesn't drag the conversation down more.
To be fair, I'm the one that opened it up with the poop bomb. The guy.
Touche.
You go that far. I
Hashtag blame Jay. Hashtag blame Jay.
I will, because he's constantly using this anti-Dutch sentiment against you. He's a bigot. Which is weird because he's not even really a nationalist, but he just seems to hate the Dutch.
Everyone hates the Dutch.
There's only two people I can't stand, Jeff. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
Yeah. Michael Fredgren says, review the JRobin Jack debate. I can't do that tonight. I do not have enough. I don't have enough to do that. I will be doing that one soon. I'm probably the JRobin Jack one.
I sent you a brilliant video by Enlighten One.
I know. But that's not really like, there's not a lot to review there. It's just more like highlight some of the weird things he says, and then like exhibit.
I sent it to Tom Rabbit as well. I'm really curious what he's going to do with it when he posts it on the channel.
I wouldn't. Peter has. I've got it downloaded, so I can share it with you later. But it was a stream, an atheist helpline that Enlighten has. Enlighten from these clubhouse rooms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it was one of these ones he started up, and he's on there for about 11, 12 minutes maybe, and he's just waiting for somebody to come on, and he's doing his usual flex. Come on, atheists, come at me. And then he's just saying he's acting like a 13-year-old boy or something. It's really weird. And then it just gets weirder, and there's a little bit of a lull in the middle where he's mostly quiet, and then he starts trying to entertain himself by acting like a psycho. Like it is worth listening to. And my guess is, Peter, Tom Rabbit will chop some bits up and use them, for some sound effects later, because it's definitely worth that. Like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, there's some weird things he's doing here that are.
You mean when he smacks himself and then he smacks?
I was about to say that. Like, he smacks himself and says, like, no, it's like he says Satan and then smacks himself and then sorry, Father.
Sorry, Father. Yeah. This isn't as categorically weird as that, but it is performatively much stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh, so
Because
this is
that's weird. Because that's weird.
So this
Because
is
it's
a
like
different thing then.
So this
yeah,
is
because that like the other video, that's like something Carrie's mom would do. You know, they're all gonna laugh at you. The first sin was intercourse, kind of thing. That's like, okay, this guy's nuts. When you see this one, this is more like he's like playing up that he's nuts, and it's not like super loud or anything. It's just
No.
weird. It's very, very weird.
I just need to know whether or not he orgasmed while he did that.
And on that, we're gonna get out of here. All right, folks, we're gonna be wrapping this up on that note. That's perfect. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Thank you, everybody, for the panel. Yeah, I will be staying on if you guys want to hang out and chat a bit. We will see you later. I hope to be doing another one of these shows possibly tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to cover some more Tom Rabbits content because there's plenty more out there that I've been wanting to talk about, but I haven't been able to talk. So
I might be able to. I might be going live tomorrow morning, doing a little, or well, for East Coast people, might be early afternoon for the Slapstick Saturday. Might.
All right.
Jefferson, just one thing. Now you said that you weren't able to talk. A lot of people will be emailing you or messaging you on Discord if you can pass down to me what you had.
That could be it. All right. And we'll see you later, folks. Everybody have a good night. I will catch you all later. Take care. Be good to each other. Bye.
That all.